What's going on, everybody? I'm back with another video. This video is going to be looking at the tactical breakdown of Brighton in possession versus Manchester United in the Premier League today. So Manchester United approached the game a little bit differently, as we see here in a 4-3-1-2. And before we get into the tactical breakdown of how Brighton played against Manchester United, this is a new app. I'm using it for the company that made it. If you like the way it looks and want to learn more about it, subscribe to the channel. The name of the app will be released soon. And as always, check out both my books in the description below and my tactics course as well. Now let's get right into the tactics of the video. So Brighton started in their base shape of their 4-box-2 with wide wingers and narrow starting fullbacks. This will soon change because of their three midfielders having to span all the way across into the width. So more often than not, Brighton would use wider fullbacks, which would be dependent on the box and midfield and the positioning of the wingers. So we're going to slightly narrow them and keep the diagonal pass to the winger. Now, even if they were both in the wide area, they would always try and stagger one another, even ever so slightly, to maintain the diagonal pass. But the key movement from Brighton to break down the Manchester United block was from their two holding midfielders and two center backs. So Bruno Fernandes played in this 10 position for Manchester United, and the right-sided midfielder for Brighton was the most important person in their build-up. So from here, he would either, earlier in the game, Pascal Gross would drop deeper on the outside of the triangle and would release the fullback a bit higher and allow freedom for the winger. So we'd have this diamond structure in the wide area in the half space. Pascal Gross would be able to receive the ball free because the midfielder wouldn't be able to jump to him, and Bruno Fernandes wouldn't be in distance to jump to him either. So then this would cause a free player in build-up, which would allow them to start progression, and the only thing he would worry about is either a player jumping or Marcus Rashford back pressing. But either way, they always had an outlet via their center backs and a safety net in their fullback out wide. So most often times, the midfielders would jump across, or they'd stay conservative and allow Bruno Fernandes to jump. And then what this would create is a midfielder free in the holding midfielder position, so getting him facing forward to then pass diagonally into the half space was the big concept. And how they did this through multiple ways, often through just plain staggering. If one player was higher or one player was deeper, they could then find him through a third man with this player starting higher, connect to the number 10s, or he could stay deeper. Bruno Fernandes would be drawn out and then affected using man orientation. So visiting the width, making a depth run into the half space with the midfielders coming across would allow the player to dribble back where the ball came from, to use the momentum of the midfield shifting, and find the player in the central corridor connected to the half space and to the far side. So that was just one way that when the midfielder would go lower, we could see him receive possession of the ball and drive the numerical superiority further forward. Now, as the game developed, they moved away from this, as sometimes, because of the distance from Marcus Rashford, sometimes they could get trapped in these areas. And when the midfield would shift across well, we would see the ball go into the width, players would shift over, and this is where the isolation would occur. So with midfield 3 shifting behind, Bruno Fernandes taking out the pass horizontally, and 2 forwards, it could create a very dangerous transition against Brighton. So they moved away from this build-up and way to create numerical advantage. And in the second half, they moved more towards staggering their midfielders with their right-sided 8 playing higher and referencing Bruno Fernandes playing off his shoulder between the lines in the half space and pushing the 10 further forward. So this staggering would allow him to become free because of Manchester United's pressing. The wide midfielders were often then stuck in position. So we now have, because of the Manchester United shifting, have a 2 versus 1 against Bruno Fernandes. They would be both on the outside shoulder of him, so they'd be connected and both connected to the half space. So they'd have a skewed box now, and when they would visit the width, they'd have players around the half space to make depth runs in behind or come out wide with the winger holding the width. And because of the staggering, if the midfielder jumped and Bruno Fernandes came across, our free player would appear on the far side. If not, we would have a 2v1 around the ball and even a 3v1 or 3v2, depending on who's shifting across. Usually the back four would also shift across, one center back would jump, so we could isolate a 3v2 out wide. If Bruno Fernandes came, we could then find him on a switch using runs to affect the man orientation just like prior, but the key was finding one of the two holding midfielders free on the opposite shoulder of Bruno Fernandes to then get more connected between the lines. Now, because of Bruno Fernandes doing the job by himself, when the ball travel will go, we would see one of the holding midfielders drop. We would see one of the holding midfielders drop deeper, so when the press would come, we would be able to create a 3 versus 2 around the ball, and if connections weren't secure, we could always use the goalkeeper and go back. But this was the final way that we're going to look at how they broke down Manchester United. So because of the two holding midfielder, Bruno Fernandes usually latch on to the deeper one, and if this was cut off and the forward pass was cut off with the cover shot, we could drop our fullback and create tight connections into the center to then go forward in the half space diagonally. So these are a few ways Brighton looked to break down Manchester United. If you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.